The rain fell hard that night, drumming on the rooftops of Coldwater Town, a lonely settlement at the edge of the frontier where laughter was often cruel and hearts were colder than the storm. Mud ran down the main street in sluggish rivers, and lanterns flickered behind dusty windows. The sound of thunder rolled like the growl of a restless god, and in the center of the street, chained to the old hitching post outside the sheriff's office, stood a woman. Her white dress was soaked through, clinging to her trembling body, her long hair plastered to her face. The townsfolk had gathered under awnings and balconies, their eyes glinting with mockery as they whispered and laughed. She brought it on herself. A man sneered, spitting into the mud. "Should have known better than to talk back to Sheriff Dunn," another chuckled. A few women turned their faces away, but even they did nothing. Her name was Evelyn Harker, a 30-year-old widow who had once owned the finest dress shop in Coldwater. Now she was barely recognizable, her lips pale, her eyes glazed with exhaustion. The rain washed over her like punishment, soaking her chains, turning her skin blue with cold. She had been left there since sunset, accused of a crime no one truly understood. Every minute that passed, her knees weakened. Her breath came shallow and ragged. The sky above flashed white, and the thunder cracked so violently that a horse nearby reared and bolted. But Evelyn didn't move. She couldn't. Her strength was draining like water through her fingers. Just beyond the hill, through the curtain of rain, a lone rider approached. His horse was a black Mustang, its mane whipping with the wind. The man rode bare-chested despite the chill, his skin the color of the desert earth, his muscles coiled with quiet power. Long black hair fell over his shoulders, and his eyes, dark and fierce, burned with the reflection of lightning. His name was Kael, an Apache warrior who had not set foot in a white man's town for many seasons. He rode to trade pelts for supplies, unaware that he was about to witness something that would tear through the stillness of his spirit. When Kael reached the edge of town, he slowed his horse. What he saw made him freeze. There, under the sheriff's balcony, was a woman, a chained woman, in the pouring rain. Her head hung low, hair matted to her face, water streaming down her cheeks like tears. Around her, laughter echoed. He could not believe it. To the Apache, to chain a woman, any woman, was an act of desecration, an insult to the sacred. His jaw tightened, his heart pounding like war drums. He dismounted silently, his moccasins sinking into the mud. A young boy noticed him first. "Look, an Injun!" he shouted. Heads turned. A few men stepped forward, hands resting on their holsters. Kael's eyes didn't leave Evelyn. He could see the faint tremble in her lips, the cut on her cheek, the way she tried to stand tall even as her body gave in. Something inside him, a buried instinct of protection, of fury, ignited like a spark to dry wood. What did she do? Kael's voice cut through the storm, deep and sharp. The sheriff, a tall man with a red face, leaned over the balcony with a smirk. "She's a thief," he said, "and a liar. Thinks she's above the law. But don't you worry, Savage will deal with her in the morning." The crowd laughed again, louder this time. Kael's hand clenched. The rain poured harder, thunder shaking the sky as if the heavens themselves were enraged. Evelyn lifted her head weakly. Through the curtain of rain, her eyes met Kael's dark meeting light. In that single glance, something unspoken passed between them. She didn't speak, didn't beg. But her gaze carried the quiet plea of someone who had already accepted death. Kael took one slow step forward, then another. The townsman stiffened. "You dishonor her," he said, voice like a growl. "Untie her, now." The sheriff laughed, spitting over the rail. "Go back to your hills, Apache. This ain't your business." Lightning flashed again bright, blinding, and in that light, Kael's face hardened into something ancient, something dangerous. "This storm," he said softly, "will wash away more than rain tonight. And as the thunder cracked, the townspeople saw in his eyes a fire that would not be put out. The thunder rolled across the valley, echoing through the wooden bones of Coldwater Town. Rain hammered on rooftops, on the swinging saloon sign, on the chains that held Evelyn Harker captive. The townsfolk began to murmur as Kael, the muscular, shirtless Apache with tribal jewelry and storm-dark eyes, stepped further into the muddy street. He moved like a predator, slow, deliberate, and full of quiet danger. Sheriff Dunn laughed from his balcony, but the laughter cracked under the sound of thunder. "You deaf, Engine?" I said, "This ain't your business." She stole from the town treasury. "You step one more foot closer and I'll hang you next to her." Kael didn't flinch. The rain poured down his face, dripping from his jawline, soaking the leather strap that hung across his chest. His black hair clung to his shoulders as lightning flashed again, turning him into a silhouette of power. "She's dying," Kael said simply, voice deep as the canyon wind. "Then let her die," a woman shouted from under an awning. "She's a thief," another man barked. Kael's gaze swept the crowd, men hiding behind law, women behind fear, all of them feeding on cruelty. "No law worth keeping leaves a woman in chains," he said. The sheriff's hand went to his revolver. "You got one chance to ride out, Apache." "I won't say it again." Kael didn't answer. Instead, he strode forward, each boot sinking into the mud. The crowd tensed. A drunken ranch hand stepped out, waving his rifle lazily. "Back off, savage," he slurred. Kael's hand flashed, faster than the storm. In a single motion, he caught the man's wrist, twisted it, and the rifle fell into the mud. The man screamed, clutching his arm. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The sheriff cursed, stepping down from the balcony, rain drenching his badge. "You just made yourself an outlaw, boy." Kael met his glare. "Then let your law try me." Behind them, Evelyn swayed. Her knees gave way, and she fell into the mud with a weak cry, her chains rattling against the post. That sound, the small, helpless sound of pain, struck Kael deeper than any bullet could. He turned sharply. In 2 strides he was beside her, kneeling in the mud. Her skin was cold to the touch, her pulse faint. Rain trickled over her lips. "Stay still," he whispered. Her eyes fluttered open, dazed. "Why? Why do you care?" She murmured weakly. Kael looked into her eyes, a gray like stormlight. "Because no one else does." He stood, gripping the chain that bound her wrists to the post. It was thick, rusted iron, fastened with a padlock. The sheriff raised his revolver. "Don't you do it, Apache." Kael wrapped the chain around his arm. The metal bit into his skin. He heaved with all his strength, muscles rippling beneath the rain. The wood cracked, groaned, then split apart with a thunderous snap. Evelyn collapsed forward into his arms, too weak to stand. The crowd shouted in alarm. "Get him!" The sheriff yelled. Men drew their guns. Kael swung Evelyn over his shoulder and bolted down the muddy street. Bullets tore through the rain, slamming into walls and posts. Horses reared in panic. "Stop him!" Voices screamed. Kael vaulted over a water trough, sprinting for the outskirts of town. His bare feet pounded through puddles, his lungs burning, Evelyn's faint weight against him like a dying bird. The black Mustang neighed wildly as Kael reached him. "Hold on," he said, placing Evelyn carefully across the horse's back. He leapt on behind her, wrapped an arm around her waist, and kicked the horse into motion. The animal lunged forward, hooves exploding through mud and rain. Shots rang out behind them. One bullet grazed Kael's arm. Another tore through the hem of Evelyn's soaked dress. But he didn't slow. The storm cloaked them, thunder drowning out the shouts of Coldwater Town. Within moments, they vanished into the open plains, a dark shape against lightning and rain. By the time the town faded behind them, Kael's breath was heavy. He looked down at Evelyn, her eyes half closed, lips trembling, rain still falling from her lashes. "Why would they do this to you?" he asked quietly. She barely whispered, "Because I found out something. I wasn't supposed to know." Kael's eyes narrowed. The words hung in the storm like a curse. Somewhere behind them, the church bell tolled. And Kael knew this wasn't over. Coldwater's law had just made war with something far more dangerous, a man who didn't fear it. The rain had slowed by dawn, fading into a soft drizzle that clung to the high ridges. Mist rolled over the plains as Kael rode through the fog, his arm bleeding from the bullet that grazed him, his jaw tight with exhaustion. Behind him, the town of Coldwater was just a ghost in the distance, a blur of rooftops and hate disappearing in the storm's wake. In front of him, the land opened wide, wild, ancient, and quiet. He knew these canyons like the veins in his hand. They were the refuge of his people, the last sacred stretch of ground untouched by white man's greed. Evelyn Harker lay slumped against his chest, her head resting near his shoulder. Her soaked dress clung to her, her skin pale and cold. Kael could feel the faint flutter of her breath against his ribs. When the black Mustang finally stopped near a hidden canyon stream, Kael dismounted carefully. The place was surrounded by tall red rocks, half swallowed by mist. The sound of rushing water echoed softly, carrying the scent of sage and wet earth. He laid Evelyn on a flat patch of grass beneath an overhang, shielding her from the drizzle. Her eyelids flickered open, eyes gray and lost. "Where are we?" she whispered. "Safe," Kael said. "For now." He tore a strip from his leather pouch, dipped it in the cold stream, and cleaned the wound on his arm before turning his attention to her wrists. The skin beneath the broken cuffs was raw and bruised. He touched it gently, anger tightening in his chest. "They chained you like an animal," he muttered. Her eyes filled with tears. "They think I am one." Kael sat back, studying her face, the curve of her cheek, the stubbornness still burning beneath the pain. "Why did they chain you?" he asked softly. For a long moment, Evelyn said nothing. The wind whispered through the canyon, carrying a distant rumble of thunder. Finally, she took a slow, shaky breath. "I worked for Sheriff Dunn," she began. "After my husband died, I managed his ledgers, his letters, everything. 2 weeks ago, I found something. Records of gold shipments, taxes that were never sent east, money that vanished. Dunn was stealing from the town, hiding it in his own vault." Kael's eyes darkened. "You confronted him?" She nodded weakly. "I thought I could appeal to decency. But in Coldwater, there's no decency left. He said I forged the papers, accused me of theft, and they believed him. They always believe him." Kael looked away, jaw clenched. The sheriff's laughter still rang in his ears from the night before. "He fears what you know," he said. "That's why he wanted you gone." Evelyn's voice trembled. "He'll come for us, won't he?" Kael glanced toward the ridge. "Yes," he said simply. "Men like him always come back to finish what they start." The rain stopped entirely now. The sky broke open to a dull silver morning. Kael gathered dry wood from beneath the overhang and lit a small fire. Smoke curled upward, mixing with the mist. Evelyn sat close to the warmth, her body still shaking. She watched Kael tend to the fire, his movements calm and deliberate. The light caught the turquoise in his necklace and the faint scars on his shoulders, marks of battles long past. "You risked your life for me," she said quietly. "You didn't even know my name." Kael looked at her, his eyes steady and unreadable. "I didn't need to," he replied. "I saw what they did. That was enough." For a while they sat in silence, the fire crackling between them. The world around them felt suspended, as if time had paused to catch its breath. Then Evelyn spoke again, her voice almost a whisper. "I buried something before they took me. Proof of what he's done. It's hidden near the churchyard, under a white stone." Kael's gaze sharpened. "Proof?" She nodded. "Ledgers, receipts, enough to ruin him if someone dares to speak it." Kael stared into the flames, his jaw tightening. "He'll come for that." "For you." "For both." A faint rustle echoed through the canyon, distant but sharp. Kael's head snapped up. His hand went to the knife at his waist. "What is it?" Evelyn whispered, fear returning to her face. Kael stood, scanning the ridge above. The mist was thick, but through it a silhouette moved, slow, careful. Then another. "They've found us," Kael said quietly. Evelyn's breath caught. "How?" He didn't answer. He grabbed his rifle from the saddle, eyes narrowing. "Because the rain always leaves tracks." He turned to her, voice low but steady. "Stay down. Don't make a sound." Evelyn pressed herself against the rock as Kael stepped forward, the wind picking up again. Lightning flickered once more on the horizon, as if the storm itself was watching what came next. The morning mist curled through the canyon like smoke from a dying fire. The sound of distant hoofbeats echoed faintly, bouncing off the red rock walls. Kael crouched low beside the stream, his sharp eyes scanning the ridge above. His long black hair hung damp around his shoulders, his bare chest glistening with sweat and dew. Every sense in him was alive. Evelyn Harker sat near the small fire under the overhang, clutching the blanket Kael had given her. Her wrists still burned where the shackles had torn her skin, but her fear burned hotter. She followed Kael's gaze toward the ridge, whispering, "Is it them?" Kael didn't look back. "Yes," he said quietly. "They found our trail." Through the fog, a faint metallic glint flashed, a rifle barrel catching the morning light. Kael's hand went to his knife instinctively. He moved with quiet precision, stepping barefoot over the damp earth until he reached his horse. From the saddle, he pulled his Winchester rifle, its barrel blackened from age and use. "They'll come down slow," he said. Dunn's men are cowards when they can't see what they're shooting at. Evelyn shivered, the memory of the sheriff's sneer haunting her. "He'll never stop until I'm dead." Kael turned to her then, his expression calm but fierce. "Then we don't let him find you." A soft whinny broke the silence, the black Mustang pawing nervously at the ground. Kael froze, listening. Then a gunshot cracked through the fog. The bullet struck the rock near Evelyn, sending chips of stone flying. She screamed and ducked behind the fire pit. Kael rolled to the side, landing behind a boulder. Another shot whistled past. He spotted the flash, a muzzle firing from the ridge, and answered with his rifle. The sharp retort echoed through the canyon, followed by silence. Moments passed. Only the wind moved. Then a voice rang out from above. "You can't hide her forever, Apache. Dunn wants her alive, but we don't care much how she gets delivered." Kael's jaw tightened. "3 men," he murmured. "Maybe 4. He crawled closer to the ridgeline, using the rocks as cover. Evelyn peeked out from behind the fire, her breath shaky. "What are you going to do?" Kael's eyes met hers. "End it before they reach you." Before she could protest, he vanished into the fog. The canyon fell into a haunting silence. Only the crackle of the small fire remained. Evelyn pressed her hand over her mouth, heart pounding. Every second felt like an eternity. Then, faintly, she heard a scuffle, a grunt, a dull thud echoing through the mist. One shot, then another. Then nothing. Evelyn clutched the blanket tighter, staring into the fog. Her breathing came fast, shallow. When Kael finally appeared again, emerging like a ghost through the mist, his chest heaved from exertion. his skin streaked with dust and a thin line of blood on his arm. "They won't follow," he said flatly. Her eyes widened. "Are they?" He nodded once. "Two won't rise again." The third ran. Evelyn swallowed hard, torn between gratitude and fear. "You killed for me." Kael met her gaze without flinching. "I defended what the earth put under my protection." She lowered her eyes, tears mixing with the dirt on her face. "You shouldn't have to protect me." He knelt beside her, his voice softer. "No one should have to chain you either." For a moment, silence stretched between them, fragile and deep. The mist began to thin as sunlight broke over the ridge. Kael rose, glancing toward the east. "They'll send more," he said. "Dunn won't forgive what happened last night." Evelyn hesitated, then spoke, her voice trembling. "There's something else. Before he chained me, Dunn told me a name. He said someone was helping him hide the gold, someone higher than him." Kael's attention sharpened. "Who?" She took a shaky breath. "Judge Carter. The same man who signs every land deal in Coldwater. Dunn isn't working alone. They're stealing from the settlers, from the railroad, from everyone." Kael's face hardened. "Then this isn't just about you." He walked to the edge of the canyon, scanning the valley below. "There's a trading post half a day's ride from here. We'll get food, rest the horse, and find a way to reach that churchyard before Dunn's men do." Evelyn tried to stand, her legs weak. Kael caught her by the arm, steadying her. She met his eyes, strong, unyielding, but full of something she couldn't quite name. "You risk your life for a stranger," she whispered. "Why?" Kael looked toward the horizon. "You're not a stranger anymore." The wind picked up again, carrying the scent of dust and gunpowder. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk screamed. The storm had passed, but another was brewing, one made of vengeance, secrets, and the truth buried beneath the soil of Coldwater Town. Kael tightened his grip on his rifle, his eyes narrowing toward the rising sun. "This time," he said quietly, "the storm will come for them." The sun rose high above the mesas, spreading golden light across the wasteland. The storm was gone, but the air still smelled of wet earth and smoke. Kael rode in silence, his black Mustang trotting steadily along a narrow trail that wound between red cliffs. In front of him, the horizon shimmered with heat. Behind him, the path still bled through the mist. Evelyn Harker sat behind him on the horse, her hands clutching the saddle, her hair tangled by wind and dust. Her body ached, but her mind was awake, haunted by the memory of laughter, chains, and the sheriff's eyes burning with hatred. By noon, they reached the dust-hollow trading post, a lonely collection of wooden shacks at the edge of the desert. Smoke rose from a forge. A few wagons were parked outside, and the faint sound of a harmonica drifted from within the tavern. Kael slowed his horse, his gaze sharp. "We stop here. You stay close." Evelyn nodded. "Do you think anyone here will know?" "They'll know," he said quietly, "but they won't dare ask." They dismounted. Kael's presence drew stares the moment he stepped onto the porch's bare, muscular frame, the tribal jewelry glinting in the sun and the cold fire in his eyes. A few men whispered, but no one spoke to him directly. Inside, the tavern smelled of whiskey and dust. The barkeep, a heavy man with gray whiskers, looked up. "Ain't seen you in months, Apache," he muttered. "You come for trade or trouble?" Kael's reply was even. "Neither. Just food, water, and bandages." The barkeep grunted. "You got coin?" Kael dropped 2 silver bullets on the counter. "That enough?" The man hesitated, then nodded quickly. "Aye, more than enough." He turned away to fetch supplies. Evelyn sat at a corner table, trying to stay unnoticed. Her white dress, still torn and stained, drew curious glances from the men nearby. A pair of ranchers leaned toward each other, whispering. "That her?" one said. "Could be. Heard the sheriff's got a bounty on some lady that stole from him." Kael's head lifted slightly. His hand drifted to his knife. The barkeep returned with a small bag of rations and bandages. Kael paid him and turned to Evelyn. "We leave soon." But before they could move, the tavern door swung open. A gust of wind carried in the sound of hooves outside. Everyone went still. 3 riders entered dusty, armed, their hats low. The middle one wore a silver star pinned to his vest. "Sheriff Dunn's deputies," Kael whispered. Evelyn's heart sank. The lead deputy, a tall man with a crooked grin, scanned the room. "Evening, folks. We're looking for a woman. About 30, dark hair, pale eyes. Accused of theft and lying to the law." His gaze landed on Evelyn. "Well now, looks like we found her." Kael stood slowly, his movements calm but coiled with danger. "She's under my protection," he said. The deputy smirked. "That right, Apache? Dunn said you'd gone soft." Guess he was right. Evelyn rose shakily, whispering, "Kael, don't." But Kael's eyes had already turned to steel. "You have one chance to walk away." The deputy laughed, spitting tobacco into the sawdust. "You think you scare me?" Kael's hand shot out faster than a rattlesnake. He grabbed the deputy's wrist, twisted, and drove his knife into the man's shoulder in one fluid motion. The deputy screamed, falling back. The other 2 reached for their gunshots rang out. The tavern exploded into chaos. Glass shattered, people dove for cover. Evelyn ducked behind a table as bullets tore through the room. Kael fired once one man fell. He rolled across the floor, grabbed the second's pistol hand, and slammed it against the bar until the gun dropped. Then came silence. Bodies lay still. Smoke filled the air. Kael stood over the fallen men, chest heaving, blood running down his arm from a new graze. He turned to Evelyn. "We need to go, now." They burst out of the tavern, mounted the Mustang, and rode hard across the desert. Behind them, the trading post burned in the setting sun. When they finally stopped miles away, Evelyn's voice trembled. "They'll never stop. Not until we're both dead." Kael looked at her, his expression carved in stone. "Then we ride to Coldwater," he said. "We end this where it began." Evelyn's breath caught. "You'd go back? After what they did to you?" Kael nodded. "Not for revenge. For truth. For your name." The desert wind howled across the plains as the sun bled into the horizon. Coldwater waited, a town full of ghosts and lies. And Kael, once a man of peace, rode toward it with the fire of justice burning in his soul. The desert sky cracked open with thunder as dusk swallowed the horizon. Kael rode hard through sheets of rain, his black Mustang thundering across the soaked canyon trail. His chest was bare, the rain rolling off his bronze skin in silver rivulets. The turquoise and bone of his tribal jewelry clinked with each stride, glinting under flashes of lightning. Behind him, Evelyn clung tightly, her arms trembling around his waist, the thin white dress clinging to her like a ghost shroud. They had escaped the trading post, but the law was close behind, a posse of 6 men with torches and rifles, determined to hunt down the savage and the traitor woman. Kael's jaw was set, his eyes like cold obsidian under the storm. He had seen this before. The mob, the cruelty, the blind hatred that festered behind white men's laughter. He'd lived through their bullets, through their prisons, through the years when they called him animal instead of man. But this time, he wouldn't run. When they reached the high cliffs overlooking the valley, Kael reined the Mustang to a halt. The rain whipped sideways, stinging their faces. Evelyn slid from the horse, collapsing against a rock, her hair plastered to her cheeks. "Kael," she gasped, her voice trembling. "They'll kill us both if we don't keep going." He turned toward her, his expression unreadable. "They've already tried," he said quietly, scanning the horizon. "But I'm not the same man they chained." Lightning flashed, illuminating his face, the scars that crossed his shoulder, the strength that lived beneath his calm. Evelyn stared at him, her heart torn between fear and awe. "You saved me," she whispered. "But why?" "You don't even know who I am." Kael's gaze softened for the first time. "I know what it feels like to be laughed at while you bleed," he said, voice deep and steady. "I saw you that night, standing in the rain, alone. The world didn't see a person. I did." Her eyes filled with tears, not from weakness, but from something she hadn't felt in years, being seen. Before she could speak, the echo of hooves grew louder. Torches burned below, flickering against the Black Canyon walls. The posse had arrived. Kael stood tall, muscles taut beneath the downpour, and loaded the Winchester rifle he'd taken from the trading post. "Stay low," he ordered. Evelyn crouched behind the horse, her heart pounding. "Kael, please." "There's too many." He glanced back, his long black hair whipping in the wind. "Then they'll have to climb over Ghost to reach you." The first gunshot cracked through the storm. The bullet sparked off a rock near Kael's head. He answered with one shot, clean, swift, final. A rider fell from his horse below, his torch tumbling into the mud. Another flash of lightning revealed the posse scattering for cover. The canyon exploded with thunder and gunfire, the rain turning to mist around the battle. Kael moved like a shadow, calm, precise, untamed. Each pull of the trigger was a memory released, a piece of vengeance long held. When the last shot faded, the storm raged louder than ever. Only 2 horses remained below, retreating into the darkness. Kael dropped to one knee, breathing hard, his rifle slick with rain. Evelyn ran to him, clutching his shoulders, eyes wide with terror and relief. "Kael, you're bleeding." He looked down, a graze across his ribs, shallow but burning. He smiled faintly. "It's nothing." Lightning flared once more, bathing them both in white light. For a brief, fragile moment, they were the only 2 souls in the world, bound by rain, blood, and fate. Evelyn pressed her forehead against his chest. "What happens now?" she whispered. Kael looked toward the valley, toward the distant glow of the town that had mocked her and hunted him. "Now," he said quietly, "we go back." Her eyes widened. "Back?" He nodded. "They chained an innocent woman. They'll face the storm they made." And as the thunder rolled across the endless desert, Kael rose, shoulders squared, rifle in hand, no longer the hunted, but the reckoning itself. Dawn broke over Ash Hollow with a quiet that felt wrong. The town that had once echoed with laughter and cruelty now sat beneath a low, gray sky, mud glistening where rain had washed away the sins of the night before. Kael rode slowly down the main street, his black Mustang's hooves squelching in the wet earth. His bare chest bore the marks of battle, a single fresh bandage stretched across his ribs. Long black hair hung damp around his face, and the turquoise and bone jewelry at his neck clinked softly with each step of the horse. Behind him, Evelyn sat upright in the saddle, wrapped in a wool blanket Kael had taken from a fallen deputy. Her eyes were hollow with exhaustion, but her chin was lifted, no longer the broken woman who had been chained in the rain. The townspeople emerged slowly, their boots sinking in the mud, faces pale in the morning chill. The same people who had laughed at her now watched in uneasy silence as the pair rode in from the canyon. The sheriff, a heavy man with a weathered face and eyes full of fear, stepped out from the saloon porch, hat dripping with rain. His hand hovered near his revolver, but he didn't draw. "Kael," he said hoarsely, "you've caused enough blood for one night." Kael dismounted, his boots sinking deep into the muck. "No," he said softly, his deep voice cutting through the morning air. "You caused this when you chained her to that post." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Women clutched their shawls tighter. Men shifted uneasily, remembering the laughter that had filled the square that night. Evelyn stepped forward. "You called me a liar," she said, her voice trembling with restrained fury. "You said I stole from your town. But the money was yours, Sheriff, taken from widows, from children, from the same people you swore to protect." The sheriff's jaw tightened. "Careful what you say, woman." Kael took a step forward, the movement slow, deliberate, like a storm gathering on the horizon. "You beat her," he said, his voice low but laced with iron. "You humiliated her. You chained her while your men laughed." He stopped only a few feet from the sheriff. The crowd held its breath. Even the wind seemed to still. Lightning flashed far away, the echo of the night before, and in that moment, Kael's eyes burned with something ancient and unyielding. "You called me savage," he said. "But look at yourselves." No one spoke. The sheriff's hand trembled near his holster, but he didn't pull. Instead, his eyes darted to the faces around him, the same faces that had once stood with him. None of them met his gaze. Evelyn's voice broke the silence. "You think the world forgets," she said softly. "But it doesn't. It remembers what kind of men laugh when a woman cries." Kael looked to her, then back to the crowd. "Leave her be," he said. "If I ever hear her name cursed in this town again, I'll come back, and next time I won't stop at words." The sheriff's shoulders sagged. His hand fell away from his gun. The fight had gone out of him, drowned somewhere in the storm that had already passed. Kael turned and helped Evelyn back onto the horse. The crowd parted in silence, stepping aside as if the earth itself feared to stand in his path. As they rode past the edge of town, Evelyn looked back one last time. The chains still hung from the post in the square, glistening wet and rusted. She reached out, touching Kael's arm. "Do you think they'll ever change?" she whispered. Kael's eyes stayed fixed on the open horizon. "Maybe," he said, "if they learn to feel the rain instead of hiding from it." The Mustang picked up speed, hooves thudding softly in the wet earth. The town faded behind them, swallowed by mist, memory, and regret. The storm had ended, but something new had begun, something fierce, quiet, and eternal. Two souls once broken by cruelty were now bound not by chains, but by the storm they had survived together. And as the first light of morning spread across the canyon, the sound of distant thunder rolled once more, not of anger this time, but of remembrance. Kael and Evelyn rode into it, toward the unknown, toward freedom, and toward a peace the world had long denied them.